We are back with more NBA playoff coverage, and in this one, I will be covering all the Game 3 action in the conference finals round. To get things started with the Timberwolves and Thunder, they were heading back to Minnesota for what was honestly a pivotal game at this point. And again, Anthony Edwards would come off of an aggressive but not truly efficient game, while Julius Randle was just nowhere to be found and virtually unplayable when it mattered the most. So, before this game even started, I was clamoring for the concept of having Randle and Edwards start this game off dominantly. Because if they did not get it going early, I did not feel as though they were going to stand a chance in this one. And let's just say that, for the most part, instantly, neither of them would leave anything on the table. Quite literally. After, I guess, a couple of buckets from Isaiah Hartenstein to start out the game, the Wolves took it over completely. Julius Randle would instantly get back-to-back possessions, just hitting tough fadeaway jumpers. And then Anthony Edwards just got consistent two-way plays to go down and set the tone immediately. I mean, you even had on his first bucket, which was a transition play, you had Rudy Gobert on the perimeter getting himself a steal on Jalen Williams somehow. Like, I did not see that coming at all. But nonetheless, as things continued, Anthony Edwards just continued to get even more aggressive in the earliest stretches of this game, taking it right at the rim for tough layups, hitting timely three-pointers, and consistently being a pest on the defensive end, as he would just get himself in the lane for an easy dunk while also just being an active presence. Simply put, like, this play saw him literally sky out from the baseline just to hawk the ball down, evade past everyone, and then just throw down a damn ferocious dunk to hype up the crowd even more. Then you would have him eventually get back-to-back possessions with a three, while once more getting another on-ball steal and just cruising into the paint for another easy transition opportunity. And those kinds of plays right there are what helped the Timberwolves out mightily in this one. It had been the Thunder defense just getting all in the grill of different Timberwolves ball handlers and forcing that kind of pressure and contact to where they have no choice but to give up the ball or just do something completely stupid. Now the Thunder were faced with that as well. And where Anthony Edwards was able to just take all the names he wanted and just produce left and right, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander couldn't get anything going in this period. I mean, they were giving him a few opportunities to shoot, of course, because for whatever reason, they just are content with letting him go in isolation against different players for some reason. But it did not end up being as easy as he would have anticipated, because as he drove, different bodies just came in and swarmed him completely to where he had no, I guess, effective angle to attack at all. And that, by and large, hurt the rest of the Thunder squad. With that happening, generating offense was a massive difficulty. Shooters were not able to get comfortable at all out there. They had to do a lot more moving around and thinking that they would usually be accustomed to. And obviously, they're not necessarily a great three-point shooting team anyways. And then as for their other core stars, they struggle to get in rhythm as well. While they are both respectably good, Holmgren and Williams obviously, it is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that allows them to settle in to those different positions. And with him not being able to go, there's going to be a lot more pressure on those two. They didn't rise into it especially in this early stretch. The Thunder would get just a few more buckets, while the Timberwolves would go on an 18-5 run with all of this taking place, en route to what would be a 34-point first quarter for them. And the second quarter, for the most part, would see much more of the same, with one slight alteration. Because what would typically happen is that Chris Finch in this playoff run has gone as much as 8 deep. And in some cases where there have been blowouts, he'll probably deploy the rest of his bench unit, but he's mostly gone 8 deep. Terrence Shannon Jr. had not truly logged a lot of playing time in this playoff run overall, which makes sense. You know, the Illinois rookie obviously did perform well against the Thunder, so I've been consistently asking for him to, I guess, be in some of these games at least. But even then, still, you know, with the situation that you're in, you might not necessarily trust him. But I suppose just for one time, Chris Finch decided to just give it a try. And let's just say that his contributions exacerbated things completely. He came in and they were already up by 20 at this point. But Terrence Shannon Jr. just gets right to work, getting an and one in his first 12 seconds on the fucking court. Then getting another money fucking jumper inside the 2-point line with his little lefty shot on the mid-range. It was insane. And then down the line, he would get himself yet another bucket. All of a sudden, before you know it, this man comes into the game in just the first 4 to 5 minutes and puts up 9 second quarter points of his own on what would be another 30-19 run for the Timberwolves, which saw Michael Conley Jr. also hit a good amount of open jumpers himself. Now, granted, the Timberwolves at times were susceptible to those backdoor cuts once again, but by holding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in check and continuing to stay glued to the shooters, just clogging up any sort of driving lanes, and most importantly, they did, despite those few lapses, their paint defense was much better. The Thunder had full control of that restricted area in the first couple of ball games, and that was not going to happen here, even if there were plays that they did make in that area of the court. Wasn't consistent enough, wasn't efficient enough, and the Timberwolves were just able to continue burying them with their three-point shooting and their bench production. At halftime, they had a 29-8 advantage in bench points because you had Dante DiVincenzo step in and also hit a good amount of three-pointers himself. Even Naz Reid with his set shot just doing what he does typically. And that would just make things even more difficult for the Thunder, who would now be down 72-41 at halftime. 14 points was already the fewest points they had in the first quarter in this postseason. And yet, they were quite literally just performing at a rate that wasn't truly representative of themselves. But also, it's about the fact that they had Randle and Edwards for Minnesota just get right into the action that early in the game, because it set the stage for everyone else. And once everybody was able to click, the Thunder were just not really able to keep up with it. Now, granted, 31-point leads at halftime aren't necessarily impossible to surmount, but for any team that is trying to do it, it largely consists of starting out fast in the next period. And for the Thunder here, to be honest, they did allow a few responses from the Timberwolves here, but they did go on what would be a 13-2 run, or well, an 11-2 run to start out the third quarter, and it eventually forced the Timberwolves to call a timeout. Now, honestly, I will commend Minnesota here for not necessarily panicking and getting out of rhythm, because there are teams who, even with the slightest amount of push, will just crumble in moments like that. For them to not only withstand that run, but also respond with their own 33-14 run eventually over the course of the rest of the third quarter and part of the fourth quarter even, it put the game away completely. I mean, you even have Rudy Gobert, for crying out loud, actually getting offensive rebounds and putting up dunks like he normally does. Jaden McDaniels and Julius Randle continued to keep that defense honest with making their own three-pointers, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker would also come in and get them some buckets overall. The Thunder, on the other hand, ended up limiting themselves to the point where they just decided that it would be best to have in their bench unit early, because it truly wasn't worth trying to exhaust your starting lineup for the rest of this game, knowing that they were now up by as much as 42 at different points in the late third quarter here. There was no reason to continue to put them through that. So the fourth quarter would see a hell of a lot of garbage time. Though you still had Julius Randle coming in and hitting a few shots of his own to increase his overall production, which was stellar and much improved compared to how it was in the last game. Terrence Shannon Jr. continued to get buckets down the stretch as well, as his presence, though unexpected, did give the Timberwolves a sign of new life here, and maybe allowed them to now have a point of potential attack in the future to deploy. Because it's just one game, yes, but Terrence Shannon Jr. has had this kind of potential. We've seen it in Illinois, obviously, and we did see it in a few games in the regular season. So even if he's a rookie, if you can get that kind of production from him in those limited minutes, who knows how it could go for the Timberwolves. They even got to a point where you have Robert Dillingham getting minutes in this series now. And he would actually get a free throw after a few buckets from a few of their other, bench pieces, younger guys, like Leonard Miller, of course, Jalen Clark, obviously. And then Robert Dillingham would eventually get one free throw. But at least he got on the board before Luka fucking Garza did. Ironically enough, he would miss and then get the ball back and give it to Luka Garza to score a bucket, ironically enough. He would also hit a three-pointer down the stretch, and he was truly feeling himself at that point. Honestly, you can't blame him, because the entire team was just on cloud nine at this point. They were completely whooping their ass. And that's honestly how you can truly summarize this game right here. It was a beatdown of epic proportions for the Timberwolves, and they needed it to keep their season alive. Winning 143-101, I believe that this is the most points they have ever scored in a playoff game in franchise history. As for some of the more general numbers here, Julius Randle would have 24 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, all without a single turnover, interestingly enough. On 9 of 15 shooting with 2 threes. Anthony Edwards, meanwhile, in 30 minutes, had 30 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists with 2 steals, on 12 of 17 shooting with 5 threes. Those efforts, at least 30 points on at least 70% shooting, would make him the second player in Minnesota history to record that stat line in a playoff game with that kind of efficiency. Obviously, Kevin Garnett did it earlier. And again, anytime you're going to be in the same discussion as him, when it comes to Timberwolves, yeah, you're doing exactly what you need to do. Like 15 first quarter points. And then just keeping it steady throughout the rest of the game to where they don't even really need to have you in down the stretch because you handled your business early and often. And you gave yourself that extra rest to potentially get prepared for the next game early. Jaden McDaniels had 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists on 3 of 9 shooting with 2 threes. And off the bench, Nickeil Alexander-Walker had 12 points. Naz Reid had 10 points and 8 rebounds. Terrence Shannon Jr., the rookie, coming in 13th overall minutes and putting up 15 points on 5 of 8 shooting with a 3. Leonard Miller also had 11 late. Obviously, that was garbage time, but still. The fact that the Timberwolves now could match their death a little bit in a game like this helped things as well when you look at the fact that the Timberwolves had 66 bench points. And obviously the Thunder would be a little inflated in this stat as well because they had to deploy their bench relatively early also. But still, it wasn't even just about the volume and the sheer amount of players making an impact for the Timberwolves. The fact that they shot 57.3% from the field and 50% from deep with 20 makes just completely changed the course of the game. They also had a 19 rebound advantage in total ones. And they were also able to just dominate the paint this time. So it was a great game plan. Obviously, they would have to keep it consistent for the next game. But just to keep their season alive and potentially give them momentum for the next one was certainly the best possible outcome for them. As for the Thunder, was one of the worst, especially when you look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, there's not really a lot to note about him here. They completely neutralized him. Completely slowed him down. He did not do much of anything in the first half. And it just continued a struggle in the second half, honestly. I mean, 14 points, 2 rebounds, and 6 assists on 4 of 13 shooting with 2 threes. This was so bad for him that it was by far his lowest output this season. And by far one of the worst scoring performances he's had. You literally have to go all the way back, as they stated, to March of 2024 against the Bucks for the very last time he had an output this low. He's just been so damn consistent. And yet, the Timberwolves, for one night, made it seem as though he was not truly a factor at all. They completely got him out of his element and made him as uncomfortable as possible. And it worked wonders for them. Jalen Williams had 13 points on 3 of 9 shooting with 2 threes. Chet Holmgren had 10. Lou Dort and Isaiah Hartenstein both had 6. Just a struggle for that starting unit as well. 49 combined points for those guys. They just got behind the 8 ball early. And they truly were never able to overcome it. Even with these threes here, again, just 31.8% shooting in a situation where they just completely outpace you with a little less volume and also continue to buy themselves extra possessions and prevent you from securing them yourself. This was just a completely different Oklahoma City team compared to pretty much anything we saw all season. And while that does show a little promise for the Timberwolves, at the same time, I don't know if one could really expect to have SGA piece together that small output ever again. You know, obviously they're riding a little bit of momentum going into Game 4, but I don't think that the Thunder would truly be able to replicate a performance as bad as that one. It does not make sense. Like, it doesn't really get much worse than that. Like, they truly shouldn't even be given the rights to say that they scored 100 points in this ball game, because obviously they struggled to just reach that milestone. But I don't think that this is something that would be repeated. Anything is possible, though. Moving on to the Knicks and Pacers. And honestly, rather than talk about how the first quarter went, I'm going to mostly focus on the early stretch of time with having Mitchell Robinson starting in this lineup against the Pacers. Because honestly, I just didn't understand it. I mean, there was a report earlier in the day, before the game even took place, that stated that they were contemplating doing this. And to an extent, one of the only pros that I found from this specific idea is that it does keep Josh Hart energized off the bench. Obviously, he's been in a six-man position before and has produced very well from that role. I understand that. But at the same time, everything else seemed to scream con. Like, you're telling me in that situation before this game even takes place, and honestly, with how some of these things went earlier on in the game, it was a struggle. Because for a guy in Mitchell Robinson who is obviously there for paint defense and has gotten a little bit more improved on the perimeter, he is still so slow. So to have a front court consisting of guys in Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns, who, while he is a little faster, is still slow-footed as well, for a team in the Pacers that is predicated on the pace and space style of play, you're going to have guys out there who, if they aren't caught out of position, they're going to be exploited consistently, because they aren't going to be able to always recover in time to contest the shot. I mean, quite literally, you see a broken play earlier on in the game where Andrew Nembhard is just given all the time in the world to step inside the paint, dribble back outside, and then settle right back into an easy fucking jumper that ended up being a two-pointer. Or also the litany of fucking three-point shots that they were just able to get up with ease. Now, granted, these guys were not necessarily hitting their three-point shots, and to an extent that is what the Knicks were banking on by having Mitchell Robinson in there. You know, obviously he's that terrorizing in the paint to where he's going to deter anybody from so much as stepping inside. But even still, as the first quarter went on, that wasn't always effective, because in some cases, I suppose, they were running zone. And while he was supposed to be manning the middle, you had situations where he got completely switched off onto another ball handler or potential threat on the offensive side of the basketball. Like, his direct matchup should be Miles Turner in this situation. So why in the hell, on multiple occasions, were they able to have Miles Turner be guarded by none other than Miles McBride? Because he would sub in with around 4 minutes and 51 seconds left in this game. Miles Turner is literally able to, within the span of just a single minute, get Miles McBride out of there. Because Miles McBride at this point had 3 damn fouls, 2 of them committed on Miles Turner, by simply just trying to stand in the paint and deny Miles Turner the ball. Yet that's not an easy task to do. Of course the Pacers are going to try to dump it to him on the inside, because he's not going to be able to guard him like that. He's just a much bigger body, and the height advantage is very large. So there's just no way that they expected him to hang in there. And that is something that I will place blame on Mitchell Robinson for. There's no excuse for that. He also got caught looking numerous times and just allowed easy shots in the paint. But down the stretch again, you have him in for paint defense and also offensive rebounds, which ended up being very important, I guess, when you look at the general outcome of the game. Also, from another standpoint, Karl-Anthony Towns struggled mightily. Obviously, with them being able to focus on Mitchell Robinson a little more because, not even focus on him a little more, but obviously having Karl-Anthony Towns be the much better, by country miles, offensive player than Mitchell Robinson, you could naturally divert and deploy more bodies over to handle Karl-Anthony Towns in a variety of different ways, whether you're getting physical with him or whether you're just simply making sure that he doesn't get the ball or get to his specific spots on the court. Mitchell Robinson is not an offensive threat at all. Obviously, you have to watch him when it comes to rebounding, but it just makes life harder for Karl-Anthony Towns right there, and he felt that because for virtually the first 3 quarters, he didn't do much of anything at all. Had just 4 points, was very inefficient, all because of that extra pressure granted by the Pacers defense over to him as a result of Mitchell Robinson's deficiencies on that side of the basketball. And then it just continued to get even worse for the Knicks, apart from just having Mitchell Robinson start and just completely mishandling the entire thing. Because while that was one thing, fouls were just a completely different thing as well. I mean, you had Miles McBride get in early foul trouble. As I mentioned, 3 fouls in a minute is insane, and he had to sit down. Jalen Brunson was also dealing with foul trouble as well, and Karl-Anthony Towns would also be dealing with a tremendous amount of foul trouble. All of them would have at least 3 in the first half, and that would extend for Jalen Brunson down the stretch, as he would ultimately reach 4 in just one half of play. Karl-Anthony Towns also, eventually after picking up one of these other fouls, had to go take time to sit down as well, because they just could not afford to crumble like that with them on the court. And all of this would play into the Pacers being able to go on what would be a 13-0 run over this stretch of time, which honestly helped them get the lead up to 20. And at that point, I thought the game was going to be put away. I mean, you had Tyrese Halliburton in 3 consecutive possessions putting up a fucking alley-oop dunk to Obi Toppin, getting a 3-pointer, and then throwing down an easy transition dunk off a steal. But to the Knicks' credit, despite having Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns sitting down, one thing that did work to their benefit was how they ended up closing the second quarter, cutting the lead down to 13. While that's not necessarily something that jumps off the page at you, they were able to buy themselves a chance to at least steal a little bit of momentum away from that home crowd. Because if that lead would have increased any more, or if they were continuing to make shots in the sheer fashion that they did, you can best believe that this game would have been a blowout. But instead, the Knicks were continuing to keep themselves in the fight. Now, the Pacers, again, they did have a few early responses from Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner. As long as you could have Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns on the court, you at least stood a chance on the offensive end. And yet, you have to credit the Pacers because they were still able to make life hard for Jalen Brunson out there, even when he was an offensive threat. Whether it was Aaron Nesmith guarding him for a while prior to his ankle sprain, or Andrew Nembhard guarding him. These shots were not easy at all, and he missed quite a few. Even ones where he was open were just not routine for him in that moment because of all of that oncoming pressure. You'd eventually have the Pacers get the lead back up to 15, and TJ McConnell as well, even with, coming off the bench, man, whether it was him doing all this in the second quarter or during this stretch of time, man, they could not stop him. He's just a fucking dog. I don't know how people don't understand that. He's just getting tough shot after tough shot to go and just trying to hold it down while Tyrese Halliburton was out. Yet still, to the Knicks' credit again, despite them finishing the third quarter down by 10 points off of a Miles Turner dunk, they were able to get the lead back down to 8 at a point. Even Miles McBride, now coming back in after facing that early struggle, was able to hit a few shots for them to keep them steady. And all of that just underlying consistency from the Knicks bench, who again rarely get playing time because of Tom Thibodeau and his mentality. I mean, quite literally, in what world would you have seen DeLon Wright, Landry Shamet, and other guys like that get playing time during this stretch of honestly any game at this point? You weren't necessarily counting on it. It's rare for Tom Thibodeau to pull that out of the bag, and yet because of the sheer amount of foul trouble that these guys were in, he had no choice. Karl-Anthony Towns would start off the fourth quarter with 4 fouls. As many fouls as points, by the way, which is absolutely atrocious to think about. Absolutely atrocious to think about. Like, there's just no excuse for that, right? Like, y'all brought that man over here for a reason, and you have him in possibly the most important game of the season to this point, putting up a stinker like that. They were going to need something from him in this stretch of the game. No matter how it looked like, something, anything, to go off of heading into the next game. Well, it's safe to say that he heard all that noise because of what would continue to happen over just the next few minutes. Now, eventually, they would close the game, or get close to closing the game, on what would be a 35-17 run, spurred completely by Karl-Anthony Towns. Whether it was him putting out some flashy passes and shit like this, controlling the glass, and just flat out going on a 20-point scoring tear. Hitting multiple threes, even getting step back ones over Siakam and Turner later on for the fucking heat check. Getting down and dirty in the paint against Miles Turner, drawing an and-one, and even just dunking it all over poor Andrew Nembhard, who could not take that. Got the and-one off that as well because he was obviously trying to draw the charge in a restricted area. All of a sudden, after that kind of flurry right there, the Pacers were down by 4. The Knicks had themselves a lead late. Now, Karl-Anthony Towns would eventually get deeper into foul trouble with 5, but he was eventually able to withstand all of it. As the Pacers, although they did find themselves in that situation, were not necessarily done, as they would eventually push the lead back down to 2, and then tie up the ballgame with Pascal Siakam. Jalen Brunson would come back in, and though he had his struggles on both sides of the basketball, because I kid you not as well, obviously fouling is one aspect, but defensively, and I guess they go hand in hand, honestly, he was just getting picked on. Like, there were 5 different sequences in this game where this man just got completely pushed out of the way. Whether it was fucking Andrew Nembhard doing it, whether it was Aaron Nesmith doing it, whether it was him being trapped inside the paint, going up against taller players. It was not easy for him out there, to say the least. But he did put it all out there, honestly, when he was in and able to play. as you would get what eventually would become the game ceiling bucket, in all honesty. I mean, you would have the Pacers get themselves another chance after a key block from Aaron Nesmith as well. And even earlier on in the stretch, Pascal Siakam did help them stay in it with a clutch block on Mikal Bridges as well. I'm not going to lie to you. Very important one. But still, you would have the Pacers get the ball back, and I suppose they could have run a better play. But honestly, even with Miles Turner having his shot, which was a three-pointer, be contested by Mitchell Robinson, I'm not going to lie to you, it went right in and out. It looked good, to be honest. And it ended up just being a tough miss for the Pacers. You would have Josh Hart get right up, leaping up in the air with all the energy in the world, and just get the rebound, draw the foul, and eventually get 2 more free throws at the line. From there on, both teams would just play the foul game, because obviously the Knicks have seen this story play out before. They did not want to have a repeat of Game 1 potentially, so you just try to do as much as you can in that moment to close out the game, and they would do it, winning 106-100 and at least avoiding a sweep in this series. Obviously, they have a chance now in the game later on tonight to potentially win, although I don't necessarily see it. You could attribute Hart's energy right there to coming off of the bench instead of playing all of those minutes game in, game out. But at the same time, I think it's just a gritty win for the Knicks overall, aided largely in part by the fact that they were able to get a little bit of production from everybody, even if the numbers will tell you otherwise. Like, for example, they said that Mikal Bridges in this game was a minus 20, but at the same time, in different moments when Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns were both out of the ball game, he and a few other players on this team just hit timely shots to just keep them steady and keep them in the fight, even if he wasn't necessarily the most efficient. Like, you've got to give him credit for that. And when they needed to make those stops defensively, he did that. So I don't know about plus minus there. You know, it's a good stat to use at times, but it is not the end all be all of everything. You can't necessarily look at it as such. But you got to look at how Karl-Anthony Towns performed in that fourth quarter as well. That was a true separator. I don't find any direct correlation between Mitchell Robinson starting the game and having them win it by the end. Because honestly, earlier on, it was looking terrible for them. Because that, along with a number of different elements, had them down by 20. He did not single-handedly get them back into the ball game. Still, it did lead to a win, so I suppose that Tom Thibodeau would not necessarily scoff at the idea of starting him again over Josh Hart. But I suppose that's something to see for later on. As for the numbers here, you would have Karl-Anthony Towns get 24 points and 15 rebounds on the night, on 8 of 17, shooting with 3 threes. As for Jalen Brunson, complete struggle bus. Not only just 23 points and 2 rebounds, but just a single assist. Obviously, we know that Jalen Brunson is a scorer, but he also has a great propensity for creating for his teammates. And the Pacers did not allow him to do that whatsoever. He even had 3 turnovers, for crying out loud. All on 6 of 18, shooting with a 3-pointer and 10 free throws. And when it came down to it, I suppose, again, you trust him with the free throws. One of the more accurate free throw shooters in the league, and especially in the playoffs. So when it came down to the stretch, you knew he would get the ball in those situations. OG Anunoby had 16 points on 6 of 9 shooting, with 2 rebounds and 2 assists, a steal, and also 3 blocks. As for Mikal Bridges, 15 points, 2 rebounds, and 2 steals on 6 of 18 shooting. Miles McBride had 9. Josh Hart had 8 rebounds and 10 assists with 4 steals off the bench. And Mitchell Robinson had just 6 points and 6 rebounds. So again, when you look at it, you have him in for defense, you have him in for rebounding, and yet Josh Hart and Karl-Anthony Towns out-rebound you. So honestly, I just don't really know how much of a difference that truly made, to be honest. It just felt unnecessary, and it felt like for a while it just served as a detriment, because obviously, even with his good defense usually, he still found himself out of place on multiple occasions and could not recover in time. And then Karl-Anthony Towns did not have the open space he would like to operate in because of that wave of defenders coming his way and just ignoring Mitchell Robinson at all times. But as for the Pacers, Tyrese Halliburton would have 20 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds, and 3 steals on 7 of 15, shooting with 2 threes. Miles Turner had 19 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, and a steal with 2 blocks on 6 of 12 shooting. Pascal Siakam had 17 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists on 7 of 14 shooting. TJ McConnell would have 12 points off the bench. And Andrew Nembhard would definitely struggle, having just 9 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists. So when I look at how this next game could go, again, it does help the Knicks that they have at least taken a game. They at least give themselves some momentum for the next one. But at the same time, I don't know about it. Because when you look at what the Pacers ended up doing, the fact that they shot just 5 of 25 from the three-point line in this game, and the fact that also in that entire fourth quarter, they shot just 5 of 19 from the field and had as many points as Karl-Anthony Towns did. I just don't think that that is something that they will truly replicate again. I'm sure that they are going to be motivated to come out in Game 4 and just handle their business completely. Like, we've seen it all postseason. They are not necessarily a team that is going to consistently find themselves in a rut like that. You could chalk it up to being an off shooting night. Because I'm going to be honest, again, yes, Mitchell Robinson does force those kinds of shots to take place. But at the same time, a great number of them were good looks, and they simply did not fall. I don't think that would happen for the Pacers again in this game. And not to mention as well, they have gone on a trend where typically the Pacers do not win Game 3s in the postseason. Yet in Game 4s, they thrash teams completely. I mean, they won in commanding fashion against the Bucks in Game 4. They beat the hell out of the Pacers in Game 4. Well, they beat the hell out of the Cavs in Game 4, rather. And then you have this upcoming game. And coming off of a tough loss like that, I'm sure that the Pacers are once more going to try to get themselves out to a fast lead. And if they do it in this game again, I don't think they're going to keep their foot, just completely removed from the gas pedal. They're going to make sure that shit is lashed onto it. Also, as if I don't already believe that they're going to win this game, in terms of the updates that, have taken place over this stretch of time, they did state yesterday, Shams Charania reported, that his father, Tyrese Halliburton's father, John Halliburton, would be allowed to attend home games now. And they are lifting the ban from him. Or the ban that was placed on him as a result of the situation, an altercation, rather, with Giannis at the end of the Bucks series. They're already coming off of that game knowing that they had it, knowing that they have all the potential to make sure that the Knicks don't even smell any ounce of victory in this game. And now you have his father being able to watch him in a suite. But either way, he's going to be there. That just adds even more momentum for them in this situation, to be honest with you. So I just, it's a strong win for the Knicks, don't get me wrong. And they are definitely in a much better spot than being down 0-3. They had to avoid that by any means. Obviously, things may not go this way because, obviously the Knicks have had huge leads, and then the Pacers also gave up a 20-point lead, with the Knicks being able to come back from at least 20 down for the third time in this postseason, which is the most for them in a postseason run. But, man, like, I suppose I don't really know if it could be a blowout. Again, this is a much different series. Though, if the Pacers could do it to the Cavs, then shit. Not necessarily something you can take off of the table here. But that will do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.